Hello and welcome back to another fun-filled 10-15 minutes of math. All right, for starters, we're going to start off with the zero product property. And if you guys can remember, in the first semester, we spent a couple lessons talking about this. So I'm just going to read it to you. A, B equals 0, meaning A times B equals 0. So what if A is 5? 5 times what is 0? In that case, B would have to be 0. Well, let's say we don't know A, but we know B. Let's say B was 3. So it would be A times 3 equals 0. Well, what times 3 is 0? Therefore, A would have to be 0. So in this case, when we have AB equals 0, either A is 0, B is 0, or A and B are both 0. But one of them has to be. And so ultimately today's lesson is a quick review of what we did in the first semester, and then we're also going to add what we did in the previous lesson, which was factoring ax squared plus bx plus c. So let's move on here. We have, let's assume a is equal to x plus 1 and b is equal to x minus 2. What we want to do is we want to substitute those in for both a and for b. So instead of writing a, I'm going to write x plus 1. And instead of b, I'm not going to write b, we're going to substitute x minus 2. And what did we say? Either a is 0 or b is 0. So in order to do a problem like this, we're going to take a and b and we're going to separate them. And like we said, either a is equal to 0 or b is equal to 0. So what we need to do now is solve them. We can subtract 1 on both sides and we get x is equal to negative 1. Over here we can add 2 to both sides and we get x is equal to 2. Well, why don't we just simply check our work super fast? So let's see, let's do red now. When we had x plus 1 times x minus 2 equals 0, let's try negative 1. What is negative 1 plus 1? And the answer is 0. And then we have negative 1 and negative 2 is negative 3. Is that a true statement? Yes, it is. And then let's try the next one. Let's try positive 2. So we have this. That was weird. So we know 2 plus 1 is 3, and 2 minus 2 is 0. Is that a true statement? Yeah. So when we're doing zero product property, if we're going to have two values like we do here, we're going to have two answers. If we have 3 values, 4 values, we'll have 3 answers or 4 answers. It totally depends. Now, moving on. And in this case, we have 3 different answers to choose from. So in this case, it's like saying a times b times c equals 0, such as, so in this case, either a is 0, b is 0, or c is 0. So we have to solve for all of them. So the first one is really easy. We just write x equals 0. Hint, there's a question like that on the assignment. So please make a note of that because it will be on your assignment. I don't know if I can make it any clearer than that. Next, 2x plus 1 equals 0. So it's a two-step equation, a teen mom question. So we kick the baby daddy out, for those that remember. And then we could divide by 2. And we get x is not negative 2, but negative 1/2. And then the next part is pretty easy. It's done in one step. We simply add 8 to both sides. and we get x equals 8. Moving on, here's a question that we need to get in the habit of seeing and understanding. It will not be on the assignment, but it's really good to know how to do a question like this. Well, I'm looking for common factors. So what goes into both 2 and 18? And the answer is 2 goes into both of them. And then these have how many x's in common? They both have one x in common. So as we said in the previous lesson, we're doing the opposite of the distributive property. So if we remove 2x times what number is going to give us 2x squared? And the answer is x. 2x times x will give us that 2x squared. And then 2x plus what will give us 18x? And the answer is 9. Now we have it factored out, and now we have our a is 2x and our b is x plus 9. So we set our a to equal 0. 0 divided by anything is always going to be 0. And then we have x plus 9 equals 0. And if we subtract 9 on both sides, we get x equals negative 9. Done. Okay, so here I have 2 questions. And as you can see, I have a graph on the bottom right. The graph on the bottom right is kind of looking forward a bit. So if it confuses you, just ignore everything that I'm talking about, only in regards to the graph. Understand how to do the blue and the red part, but when it comes to the graph, that's something a little extra. So now is a review of factoring ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0, which was the previous lesson. So what we're going to do first is we're going to make our x, and remember, a times c goes on top. So we know a is 1, b is negative 1, and c is negative 6. So a times c will give us negative 6, and b goes on the bottom. I always like to start with 1, and then go to 2, and 3, and 4. So 1 times 6 will give us the 6, but 6 minus 1 does not give us 1, it gives us 5, so that can't be it. Then we have 2 times 3 is 6, and 3 minus 2 is 1. So awesome, so it looks like the numbers are going to be 2 and 3. Well, one of them has to be negative, and since the bottom number is negative 1, we know the 3 is negative because 2 minus 3 gives us that negative 1. And then 2 times negative 3 gives us the negative 6. So what we could do now is we can write x plus 2 times x minus 3 equals 0. And then we have to solve it. So it's literally doing what we did in the last lesson, but we're just adding the zero product property on top of it. Add 3 to both sides, and we get x equals 3. Now for the extra part. Notice we have negative 2 and positive 3. Those solutions are known as the roots or the x-intercepts. They all mean the same thing. Sometimes people will talk about the roots of the equation, they'll say the solutions, they'll say the x-intercepts, but they're all the same. So here we have negative 2 and positive 3. And notice x squared is positive, so therefore it's going to be smiling. And its graph has to look something like this. This is not exact, this is not precise. I have no idea how far down it's going to go. I'm assuming it's something like that. But ultimately, what I'm trying to get at is the negative 2 and positive 3 are the x-intercepts of the graph. Going to the red graph, we want to factor this. So again, it's the same thing. We draw our x. We know a is 1 and b is 8 and c is 16. So a times c goes on top, 1 times 16, and then b goes on the bottom. So what two numbers multiply to 16 and add up to 8? 4 and 4. So here we have x plus 4 times x plus 4 equals 0. And pretty much you're doing the same thing twice. So we get x equals negative 4 here, and we're going to get x equals negative 4 on the other side as well. I can honestly do the same thing a second time, but is it really worth it? It seems kind of pointless. So what if I wanted to graph this? It's the same number. So the x-intercept is going to be at negative 4, which means there is only one x-intercept. So the graph would look something like this. Again, it's not exact, it's not precise, but it's just here to kind of get you to understand moving forward. Now, the last two problems, and just kind of go through them a little faster because I'm at the 11-minute mark and I don't want to keep you guys too long. So for the first one, we know A is 1. There is no x term, therefore B must be 0. And C is negative 81. Just a quick reminder, that's what it would look like. So we're going to draw our x. Negative 81 goes on top, and then B is on the bottom. So it's got to be opposites, like 5 and negative 5, or 7 and negative 7. So what times itself is 81? 9 and negative 9. So we now have x plus 9 times x minus 9 equals 0. And we solve these two equations. We get x equals negative 9 on that side, and we get x equals 9 on the other side. The one thing you really need to be careful about when you do the assignment is notice how we have x minus 9 here, but the answer is positive 9. It might get confusing on the assignment, so please check your work. Be careful with that. The next one is a little trickier. So remember, A times C goes on top. So here, A is no longer 1, it is a 6. So 6 times negative 5 is negative 30, and B is 13. 1 times 30, but 30 minus 1 is not 13. 2 goes into 30 15 times, so that works. And we know the 2 has to be negative because 15 minus 2 is a positive 13. Now is the tricky part. Remember, you have to take the number and divide it by A, and A is 6. And on the other side, we have x plus 15 over 6. Now you must reduce, or you will get the wrong answer. So 2 over 6, 2 goes into itself once, 2 goes into 6 3 times. On the other side, 3 goes into 15 5 times, and 3 goes into 6 twice. So here we can take the bottom number and move it in front, and we get 3x minus 1 and 2x plus 5 equals 0. Forgot those. And we're almost done. So 3x minus 1 is 0. We can add 1. And then we divide by 3. And here we get x equals a fraction, 1 over 3. The other side, we can subtract 5. And we get 2x is negative 5. Divide by 2. X equals negative 5 over 2. Now, a couple things. The lesson is done. I switched it around, so when you guys do the assignment and you don't get 5 out of 5 and you really want the 5 out of 5, you can check your work, see what you got right, see what you got wrong, and then you can go back and edit it and then try and get the better score if possible. If you guys have any questions, what I'm going to start doing now, if you haven't already noticed, at the bottom of the page, the classwork page, I added a tab of student questions. So when a student asks me a question, I'll relay the notes back to them, and then I'll just share them with the class. Because if one has a question, there's a lot of others who have the same question that are not asking it. So again, I hope everyone is well. I hope you guys are doing good. And that's pretty much it. Enjoy the rest of your evening. Bye.